People who have experienced paranormal activity, what is your story? Redditor 1. I grew up in a house that originally served as an old folks' home. At night the whole house would pop and crack. It sounded like people were walking up and down the stairs all night. My mom was always on board that the house was haunted. My dad said it was just the house settling. The house in 1984 was 100 years old. One night I woke up to the sound of a door slamming. I walked down the hall and peeked around the corner, looking down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a closet. The door was open about 6 to 8 inches, and there was a human face looking at me from inside the closet. I ran into the bathroom and tried to calm down. Finally I mustered the courage to come out of the bathroom and look down the stairs again. Nothing there. There were many experiences in that house that are harder to explain. Redditor 2. When I was younger, maybe like 5. I went to bed and I woke up to the sound of something whispering, and I thought nothing of it until I heard "Hey, PSST," and I looked up and saw a black dog with yellow eyes standing on 2 legs. I started screaming and crying and yelled for my parents, and when they came up the thing hid behind a chair in my room. I was so scared I slept with my parents for a week and never saw that thing again. I had multiple dreams about it though. It always had this power that it could make me freeze and not be able to move, and he would always do it in front of my parents and they never did anything. Really creepy shit. Edit. I found out that people in Turkey have had the same dreams and experience. The dog or being is called the jinn, is a being that comes in their victims' rooms and hold them down, not allowing any movement, and the victim eventually suffocates. While this never happened to me, I had multiple dreams where it would do that. Just thinking about this scares me. Redditor 3. I was about 16 and home alone one night at my stepdad's house. Everyone had gone out for the night except me. One thing you need to know about this household: it's in a pretty rural area, in a little village where everyone knows each other and a lot of family lives in the same town. Because of this, no one would ever use the front door. Everyone who came over would just come through the garden and use the back door and walk right in. So it's about 10 p.m., I'm watching TV, and the doorbell rings. It startled me a bit. Who could that be at this hour? So I look out the window to get a full view of the front doorstep. No one's there. As I'm looking out, the bell rings again, but there's no one there to ring it. My whole body becomes red hot with adrenaline and fear, and I'm frozen to my seat as it rings again. And again. I run to grab my phone to try and call my mom to come home cause I'm scared shitless. No answer. The ringing stops. About an hour later my parents come home and I freak out and tell them what happened, and I'm pissed at them for not answering the phone. My stepdad chuckles and says, "Oh yeah, that's my wife. It happens sometimes." His previous wife and partner for years and years had died a few years back. He said he tried to have the doorbell fixed only to figure out there's nothing wrong with it. Their theory is that when the doorbell rings it's her, reminding them she's still with them. Redditor 4. Used to be a contractor. Had to inspect all kinds of places. One was the old psych hospital known as Redacted Asylum that had long been empty. Was working on one of the floors and it was starting to feel off. It was August but got freezing inside. All of a sudden. Decided I was going to calmly but briskly leave the building. As I was going down the stairs, I think I was between the 2nd and 3rd floor, something grabbed my ankle. I booked it out of there immediately, didn't care if someone saw me, terrified or panicked. Ran the duck out of there, ripped off my PPE, called my contact to confirm I was out, and left for the day due to outstanding reports. Went home and tried to convince myself it didn't happen. Redditor 5. I posted this story before in an old long post, so I'm just going to copy and paste since I don't have time to type everything else out on mobile. I lived in a haunted house for a year. At this time it was just me and my 3 sisters. Ages 13, 5 and 2. I was 10. My older sister and I were home from school with a stomach bug. My mom had to go get my 5-year-old sister from school and asked us to watch our youngest sister. We were sitting in the living room and she was eating some snacks and had a sippy cup of water. The top to the cup must have not been screwed on tight enough because when she knocked it over, water spilled everywhere. My older sister went to the kitchen to get some napkins to clean it up. When she came back she handed me some of the napkins and we both started cleaning. We were on our hands and knees wiping up the water when we started to hear binging coming from the 2nd floor. We both paused, looked at each other and said nothing. But we both had that look of "you heard that too, right?" We stayed silent and kept cleaning. Then again, another bang. At this point we stand up and are still silent, just staring at the ceiling. Then came the giggles. We heard little kids upstairs laughing. Then the laughing turned to singing. It sounded like children choir singing. My sister scooped up the baby and we ran outside. It was a clear day out that day, but I remember once we got outside it started to rain. We had no choice but to go back inside. We stayed on the front porch until my mom got home. We saw things in that house that I still have nightmares about, 20 years later. But for some reason that giggling and singing bothered me the most. When I originally posted the entire story I had no idea how to use Reddit, so the original post is like a sloppy novel. It did however get the attention of some TV producers, and I was able to tell my story on a show about paranormal experiences as children. It was weird, but kinda neat. Redditor 6, I've always slept with my bedroom door open, right? I have a small room and it feels smaller when the door's closed. Also I was very scared of the dark as a kid anyways, so there was one night I woke up in the middle of the night for no reason, and I had a mirror across my room that faced the hallway. My bed was facing the mirror so I could see the hallway from my bed. And that night I looked in the mirror and I saw my mom in the mirror, and she was looking down and giving me the creepiest smile. I blinked and she was gone. I'm not sure if that was a sleep-deprived hallucination or what, but it definitely wasn't my mom. Sorry, I'm bad at explaining. Redditor 7, this isn't much compared to other stories in the thread, but the apartment where I'm currently living seems to have some sort of resident shadow figure. I tend to see it moving in my office sometimes. When I'm out in the hallway I'll see a shadow that looks like a medium-build man moving in my office. And sometimes when I'm in the office at my PC I'll see it out of the corner of my eye like someone standing at my shoulder, in turn expecting to see my boyfriend, but nobody is there, or down where the stairs meet the front door. The closet near the front entrance right by where I've seen the shadow lingering at the end of the stairs has opened itself a few times when I've been home alone and cooking in the adjacent kitchen. It's never seemed frightening to me, though, so whatever it is, some trick of lighting or bona fide shadow, dude, I don't really worry about it much. I did recently have a bad bout of COVID, and there was one night that I was running a temp of 103 and was just absolutely miserable, falling in and out of sleep while being anxious about my rising temp and how labored difficult my breathing was becoming. I was kind of scared since my aunt had died in her sleep due to COVID relatively early on in the pandemic. She had been on the phone with her boyfriend and mentioned she wasn't feeling well suddenly and was going to take a nap, and I couldn't help but think of her because of how quickly it seemed like things were accelerating that night. At one point I did manage to fall asleep, but was woken up by a shadow figure opening my door and coming to stand over me. It wasn't my boyfriend. I was staying completely isolated in a diff part of the apartment to protect him since he has asthma and is high risk. I asked later to confirm he hadn't randomly decided to break that quarantine that night, and he was like, OFC not, but I couldn't see anything but a shadowy outline. The figure was saying something to me, but it was unintelligible, but seemed like a question. Then it eventually walked back out of the room. I would have assumed it was a fever hallucination if my cat didn't jump up from her sleeping position to stare at the figure. Who knows, maybe it still was and I even hallucinated her reaction, but I kind of like the idea that my shadow roommate came to check on me at my sickest point, when I was anxious about being alone, since my boyfriend couldn't. Redditor 8, I used to babysit my niece and nephew when they were 4 and 5 while my sister went to work. She lived down the street from me, so I would walk down in the morning before she left and before the kids woke up. I got there one morning and after she left I laid down on the couch. I heard one of the kids run down the hall and I immediately pretended to be asleep so they would go back to bed and not get the day started yet. I felt my niece run by me on the couch. Her running stomps shook the floor and I could hear the trinkets on the shelves shake. And I felt the wind of her blow by me. Then it was quiet, but I knew she was still there. She leaned over my ear and moved my hair out of the way and laughed in my ear. And I just thought, the audacity of this girl. And then she hid under the end table of the couch. Realizing she wasn't gonna go back to bed until I woke up, I just got up and looked under the end table. There was no one there. Completely baffled at how she got up and out of the living room in literally 2 seconds without me hearing shook me. So I went down the hall to her room and was starting to freak out. My nephew was sound asleep in his bedroom, and I got to my niece's room. She was sound asleep tucked under her covers. My heart almost fell out of my body. Redditor 9, my aunt and grandma were supposed to be coming over and were going to bring dinner. I distinctly heard my back door open and my aunt yell, "Come help us grab a few things from the car." I hopped off the couch and went to help out, but no one was there. The driveway was empty. I called my aunt's phone to see where they went, and the moment she answered, she said, Yeah, we're running a bit late, but we're on our way. Just leaving grandma's house now. Redditor 10, years ago, when I was just a kid, my mom and I lived in this old apartment in MA. One day, when I was watching TV while she was cooking, all of a sudden she started to scream, yelling for me to come over and look at this. I ran over. She was standing right by the dining room table, which was empty except for a blue plastic cup at the end of it. I was confused, and asked her what the heck was going on. She didn't say anything. She just picked up the blue cup, and set it down at the other end of the table. As soon as she put it down, the cup just slid over all the way to the other end of the table, by itself. It stopped right at the edge. I jumped back, perplexed. My mom picked up the cup and did it again. And again for a third time. I've always liked technology and science. I grew up to become an engineer, so rather than being scared, I tried to figure out a rational explanation for this. I picked up the cup, and looked at it closely. I looked under and around the table. The table was spotless, and there was nothing else there. It wasn't a trick, there were no wires or magnets or anything of the sort. I tried the same thing with other objects, and nothing happened. It only happened with this particular blue plastic cup. I eventually tried it while looking directly at the cup, literally 2 inches away from it, and followed its path. The cup would actually vibrate as it moved, and did so in such a way that you could only notice it up close. To this day, I am not sure what caused the cup to move. That wasn't the only strange thing I experienced in that apartment. Redditor 11, my mom was staying at ABB in Newfoundland, and when she turned off the lights to go to sleep, she heard a lady gently whisper hello in her ear. She also had this sensation of someone being in her room. The next morning at breakfast, she mentioned her experience to the BB host, who casually confirmed that it's just Sally and mentioned that other people have seen her ghost. Redditor 12 was plumbing in a basement of a 120-year-old home on a lake in northern Maine. I felt a chill and looked to my left and saw a fella in overalls walk through a wall and then gone. I left and never went back. Redditor 13, when I was in my early 20s, I stayed the night at 2 of my friends' house. They broke out the Ouija board around midnight. Almost immediately, the board started spelling out that I needed to leave immediately and how it hated me. I didn't believe in the supernatural aspect of it, but didn't think it was my friends being that vicious to me either. It just kept with really horrible messages for about 30 minutes. The final message was that if I had taken its advice and left earlier, I would have died in car accident. Completely unnerved, I slept between my friends all night in one bed. When I got home the next day, my mom described really bizarre behavior from my cat from midnight until 1 a.m. My Siamese, Toulouse, kept running down our upstairs hallway, and flinging herself full force against my closed bedroom door. She also this really loud desperate meow. My parents were actually worried she was going to hurt herself because she was so violent. I truly believe that she was trying to get to me to keep me from harm. She never did anything like that ever again. Redditor 14, my dad has heard my mom calling him when she needed him. No phone or anything. One example, one time she dropped him off for a half-day conference in a big office tower downtown and was going to do some shopping while she waited to pick him up. She drives away and 30 minutes later starts feeling very sick. She drives back to the building but doesn't know where in the building he is or where to call him. But she just thinks his name really hard over and over, like Steve, I need you. Steve, I need you, and 10 minutes later he came running out to the car and was like, what do you want? He drove her to the hospital and she had her appendix out. Another time, my dad's driving a car down a busy road. It's one of the ones where the main road has the right of way and all the side roads have stop signs where people have to stop then merge into traffic when there's a break. Anyway, he's driving along and here's Steve. He looks around. No one in the car with him. Windows closed plus he's doing 50 miles per hour. Then he hears it again, Steve. So he slows down and looks in the rearview mirror. He thinks it might be his friend. He slows down a bit more. And a dump truck blows through the stop sign at the crossing before him. If he hadn't slowed down he would have been flattened like a pancake. Redditor 15, when my grandson was about 3 or 4, I remember him asking me who the old lady sitting on the couch was. There was no one on the couch. Some kids can see things we can't. I often joke that I can never see my reflection in a mirror. Whenever I go to look in one, there's some old man standing in front of me blocking my view. Redditor 16. When we were young teenagers we were all hanging out at a neighborhood friend's house when he decided it would be fun to pull out a Ouija board. We were all just stupid kids ridiculously high at the time, so we really had no idea what we were doing with the board. We were sitting around the board in the living room, just being dumb, asking silly questions about ghosts, spirits, dead relatives, etc. Suddenly, this guy's dog, who is a big, old, morbidly fat mutt, jumps up, runs into the dining room and starts snarling and barking ferociously at the light fixture hanging above the dining room table. There was nothing there. There was no upstairs in this house. This normally sedentary pig dog is just totally freaking out at a light fixture hanging from the ceiling. He then lets out a spine-tingling yelp, like someone kicked him hard, and he spins around and runs out of the room yelping the whole way through his exit. The group of us just sat there, with our mouths hanging open, wondering what the heck we just saw. When reality crept back and we whipped that board across the room, and bolted out of that house like it was on fire. It was honestly like something out of a movie. Only this really happened. We all concurred later that this was not something we'd hallucinated due to the excess of bud we'd inhaled earlier. Redditor 17. Buddy of mine lived in a really old building built in the early 1800s I believe in a really old small town in Texas. His apartment was upstairs, businesses were downstairs, whole building was originally a small factory of some sort that had been remodeled for more modern purposes. There were some obvious this wasn't originally an apartment features, like a small door in his closet that seemed to lead to strange empty space between the walls, with no real reason for existing. Even when the door would randomly blow itself open with freezing cold air, you could sort of write that off as being due to remodels of old buildings, and not all the kinks of ventilation and stuff being quite worked out. That's kind of the explanation he gave to the strange noises he would hear coming out of there too. Also, windows would always be open. Not windows he or his GF had opened, just random windows around the apartment. He would always close them, and then later find them open again. Seems like faulty latches that just come open over time, and not a huge deal. Then he stayed home from work one day, and he heard the window unlatch. Not only did he hear that one latch fall open, but a second later he heard the window unlatch, then another, one after the other, in order as if someone was walking through the living room unlatching windows as they went. Then all at once, each of the windows fell open. So he noped the duck out of there for the day and came back that weekend to investigate. Things seemed fine, nothing weird happened for a while, then about a month later his GF experienced the same thing when she was there by herself. After a while they got used to it. Just weird windows. Then the final nail in the coffin for that place was when they got a dog. The dog was a puppy, so was inherently happy, playful, always running around doing puppy stuff. Except when the door in the closet blew open, or the windows unlatched. Then the dog would stand completely still, focus its eyes on something that nobody else in the room could seem to see, and the dog's eyes would slowly track around the room, as if it was watching someone or something moving through the room. Nobody could ever figure out what the dog was looking at, and it only did this right after some other ghost stuff started happening. They moved out after this happened a few times. Redditor 18, I live on a relatively busy road and it was spring so all the windows were open. There is a park and a train track nearby as well. At a certain point shit just seemed to get louder and louder. The cars, the nearby train horn, the kids playing at the park, and I got the weirdest feeling of just being overwhelmed by the noise. Just when I thought I couldn't handle it, like maybe I needed to close the windows or something, the noise all just stopped. And I heard a tiny whisper say help. Then the noise started again, but at a normal volume intensity. I don't know if I stroked out or what, but thinking about it still freaks me the duck out. Redditor 19, this sounds silly, but I still stand by it almost 2 decades later. In the space between my bed and nightstand, I saw a blinking eye just kind of looking off. It never looked at me. Of course, when I would bolt out of my room to get my parents, it would disappear. I didn't even step foot into my bedroom for 8 months straight. Also, once my mom was walking down the hall and got hit by the bathroom door that swung open on its own. I could hear her yelling, "What the hell?" etc., and then the smoke alarm started going nuts. We started to ask it questions and beep once for yes, twice for no. It cooperated with us for a short time and then stopped. Redditor 20, when I was younger I used to watch wrestling. I was watching Friday Night SmackDown alone in the living room after the rest of my family left and went to sleep. It was during the time when Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were feuding 2009, so Shawn Michaels came out dressed in all white and started cutting a promo, and I was waiting for the Undertaker to come out. Suddenly I felt an intense amount of fear and started shivering. Then, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a hooded person walk behind me and disappear. I ran out of the living room into the bedroom without even turning the TV off. This might not seem like a big deal, but as a kid I felt really bad because I was wasting electricity by not turning the TV off. I felt like going back to the living room to turn the TV off, but I was too scared. Lol. I don't believe in the paranormal, so I guess it was just a hallucination. Still pretty scary though. Edited to fix spelling mistakes and add more detail. Redditor 21, my first memory is a dream of being in a house and my mom teaching me how to read, cook, and all the basics of life. I woke up talking and was very excited, around 2.5 years old. Apparently I was kind of a mute before that. No one in my family could believe it. In the dream I kept asking myself questions like, how do I know how to speak English? How do I know it's called English? How do I know this is my mom? How do I know the word for mom? Etc. We moved to that house 2 years later and I tugged on my mom's dress and told her it was the house from the dream I talked about. I'm in my 30s and she still remembers me doing that and talking about that dream before we moved there, including the entire layout of the house I described from my dream, and it was 100% accurate. I had premonitions and horrible night terrors in that house the entire time we lived there. I could barely go up and down the stairs at that age by myself. I wasn't tall enough to turn the light switch on and off. My mom would come downstairs with me asleep, crying in the pantry still with all of the lights on. Edit. I was sleepwalking but somehow could walk up and down the stairs, which I couldn't do awake, but also every single light was turned on, which I typically couldn't reach. Redditor 22, I used to work in the Winchester Mystery House. For those that don't know, it's a mansion built by the heiress to the Winchester Rifle Company. She built the mansion with confusing rooms, doors and stairways that lead to nowhere, so she could confuse the ghosts of those killed by the Winchester rifle. There had been random ghost sightings by employees throughout the years, and it was listed as an official haunted house. I worked in the office and answered phones, which happened to be one of the 160 rooms of the mansion. One of my jobs was to inform the tour station when the last tour exited, because my office was near the end of the tour and I could hear the footsteps of the tour. Well, one day around 6 p.m., as I'm closing up, I hear footsteps in the house and inform the tour station that the last tour was about to exit. They told me that the last tour left the house about an hour earlier. So, my first thought was that it was my manager on patrol. When he came back into the office, I asked him if he was in the house and he said no, he was in the gift shop. He informed me that he closed it up and absolutely no one was in the house. As he was saying that, we continued to hear footsteps in the house above us. We looked at each other with that look you give someone when you don't know what the duck is going on. He and 2 other people went into the house to look for the source of the footsteps, thinking it was a guest who had gotten lost. They walked into the exact same room where I was hearing footsteps and saw that there was no one there. When they came back into the office, we just sat in our chairs until 8 p.m., listening for footsteps as they were wandering around the house. None of us really acknowledged what we were hearing because we wanted to believe it was just the house creaking. However, these sounds sounded nothing like creaking, as they were well defined with the cadence of footsteps. I'll never quite know what it was that was above us that day. Perhaps there was a logical explanation. Let's just say, I didn't sleep well for about a month after that event. Redditor 23, my friend is part of a paranormal investigation group, and while she was giving a tour around a haunted theater, I hung out in the main theater to talk to a mutual friend. Out of nowhere, I hear a child's laugh clear as day. None of the EMF detectors went off, but I swear it was clearer than most human sounds I've heard. I could pinpoint the exact location in the room it was coming from, but there was no one there, just the wall that the theater shared with a closed, empty store that used to be a morgue. The only people on that floor of the building were myself and a man in his 50s, and the youngest person in the building was too old to have made the sound. But there are stories of a little girl from the 50s or 60s who haunts that room building because she likes being around people. Redditor 24, when I was 6 years old I went to a restaurant with my dad and grandparents. Walking into the restaurant there was a small room to the right full of arcade machines. I can't remember if other kids were there. When we got to the table I kept begging my dad to let me go to the arcade. He pointed to the gambling machines at the bar and said those are just for adults. I kept telling him that's not what I was talking about, but he wouldn't let me go. When we finished and started walking out of the restaurant I turned to the arcade to point it out. There was nothing there but a wall. Redditor 25, I live in the woods in Florida, I'm 13 miles from the nearest anything, and that's a gas station. I'm 25 miles from the nearest town. My only neighbors for 2 miles are my parents, who live across the street from me. I'm a single mom, it's just me and my son out here, and our dogs. In my living room I have a giant gray sectional couch in the shape of an L. My son, who was 6 when this happened, likes to pull up the ottoman making the couch a giant bed area that he then piles all the blankets and pillows we own to make himself a camping nest and sleep out in the living room. Now that I've established some background info, the actual story. So I'm home from work early-ish one night and my son had built his nest on the couch and passed out early, like 8 p.m., so I had time to myself and a sleeping child. I decided to play some Skyrim uninterrupted for once. I'm playing my game and smoking my bowl. I've got my medical card, just having a great time when I hear my pit bull, Aries, bark. It's not a bunch of barking, just one, insistent, "Hey mom, you left me out and I want to come and bark." Any pet owner should be nodding their head right now. We all know our pets' voices. I pause and look at the time, and I say out loud it's only 8:30, you're fine, it's a beautiful night out anyway, and go back to my game. About half an hour later, he barks again, just that one "Hey mom, you left me out here" bark. It interrupts my concentration, and I ignore the urge to get up and let him in. I continue playing, 'cause I don't get much time, working 50 hours a week and taking care of my kid and house when I'm not working. I'm mid a dungeon quest, and I'm concentrating hard, but about every 15 minutes I hear the one stupid bark, and I start to get really annoyed 'cause every time he does it, I get the literal urge to go let him in, and it just tips me out of my train of thought and ruins my game immersion, and I'm starting to get angry. If I wanted to let you in, I'd let you in, but you're 5. Finally, he does it that one last time. Most moms know what I mean. I had had enough, so I tossed down my controller, thinking how stupid this dog is, and as it hits the pile of covers next to me my kid is buried in, I hear a snore, a dog snore, and I move the blanket to see Aries, dead asleep next to my kid, not a care in his dumb doggy brain. Immediate fear and dread and heaviness like I've never felt washes over me. I can't describe it any better than an ancient fear. It felt old and terrifying, and I literally heard a voice say in my head, "Don't move, baby. Don't get up. Just keep playing like you don't know anything is wrong and it will go away. If you take one step towards that door, you're in trouble." I picked my controller back up and kept playing. I heard the bark a few more times, but around 1145 the air in my house felt normal again, but I slept out on the couch 'cause I wasn't leaving my kid alone. To answer some questions preemptively. Yes, my parents have dogs too, but theirs are in at dark every night. I asked if she left anyone out, and no. I also have 2 whiner dogs. They did not react to the barking at all, making me think only I could hear it. Had it been a strange dog, my 3 should have reacted. It was very clearly my dog barking. He does the same thing anytime he thinks Hess been out long enough, which is why I ignored it to start with. Redditor 26, I'd if I was just tripping because I was tired or what. But last year when I moved out into a place of my own and it was just me at the time, I remember laying down to sleep and getting the chills, which doesn't happen too much in Arizona summer. But I heard the most clearest voice say something, and it sounded like someone had leaned into my ear. I shot up and saw no one and forced myself back asleep. It happened one other time a couple days after, but nothing since. Redditor 27, copying my response on another post. Here goes. I have several paranormal stories, as the women in my family are particularly sensitive to the other side. I grew up in a haunted house where the activity centered particularly around my bedroom. I would awake in the middle of the night to hear the sound of pages fluttering. Think what it would sound like if you dropped a large bucket filled with books off of a tall building. That's what it sounded like. I would always investigate, but was never able to find the source of the sound. The story I'd like to tell here, however, pertains to a house my boyfriend and I went to view as we were in the market to buy. While the house was a dream come true, something felt utterly wrong there. I kept these thoughts to myself as we progressed through each room, but somehow I just could not shake the feeling that there was a sinister presence in that house. After feeling so overwhelmed by this negative energy, I told my boyfriend that we could not live there because I felt an overwhelming darkness. It was as if there were several unhappy spirits in every room. Imagine an unknown source making the air so thick that you feel like you're trudging through a dense forest in the middle of the night. I was consumed with this feeling. My boyfriend, who is not really a believer in the paranormal, just kind of brushed it off and we left. Unable to shake the feeling, I did some research on the property. I was so sure something dark was living there. Upon a quick Google search, it turns out that the house actually used to be the town morgue. When it was sold, the builder remodeled the entire thing into a home before putting it up for sale. My boyfriend was shocked and could not explain away the coincidence. The morgue was where the dead would go after their final breaths. I could only assume that some of them died by violence. That was the first time that my sensitivity to the paranormal actually had some facts to back it up. Redditor 28, I've shared this one before, but here it is again. Almost 20 years ago, when I was young enough to still be living with my parents, I was sleeping in bed one night and my cat at the time was sleeping on me, right up on my chest, her face facing mine. During the night I woke up and saw a ghostly figure of an old woman standing over my bed looking straight down at me. She had short hair and her arms were straight down by each side. I can only describe the coloring to be like a brown scale photo. I looked up at her and thought I was just dreaming. But then my cat hissed madly, dug her nails into my chest, turned her head around and looked right up at the woman. This completely woke me up. I put my hand on my cat and her hair was standing up as she was still hissing. I started calming her down and freaking out at the same time. I stuck my head under my sheets and stayed there the entire night. I was completely skeptical before this, and I have never experienced anything since. But I remember it clearly and I know what I saw. If it wasn't for the cat literally looking at the same thing and freaking out, I would have just put it down to dream. A little about my dad's house. I believe it was built in the late 70s and possibly became a deceased estate in the early 90s. From there it was sold to one family, and then acquired by my dad in '99, and he's been there ever since. The old lady reminded me of my grandmother a little, but I don't think it was her. At the time I knew I didn't recognize her, so I don't feel it was any personal connection. Thanks for reading, smiley face. Redditor 29, used to live in a haunted house growing up. Everybody who had stayed the night has some kind of story. Usually you would see quick flashes of white or black dash across a room or hallway when you turned around real quick. I saw a white cloud travel through my feet when I walked by an empty room. I was in bed and felt something poke me repeatedly while seeing nothing in the room. A childhood friend watched a black figure tiptoe across my kitchen at 2 a.m. during a sleepover. It all stopped after my dad died in the house. Mom says it shook something loose. She described a menacing figure just standing over her bed in the middle of the night. She got the house saged, blessed and all that. Haven't had an incident since. Redditor 30, so for me we were out chilling and having a few beers by the river. It was getting dark out, so my friends and I wanted to head out before it was too dark to see the trail. On our way back we saw something. Something that looked similar to a human. Us being worried about the person and if they were okay, went to shine the flashlight on the person, except there was no face. I didn't see the face because my friend was closer and I was a few feet away. My friend said it looked like static when I asked him about it. The person bolted. Went from a laying down to a standing position faster than any human I've seen and ran off. It was tall too. Like over 7 feet tall. If I had to guess, it was super dark out. The way it ran reminded me out of something that was a cross between robotic and the way that the Bionic Man ran. It ran away faster and quieter than a human. All the hair on my body stood on end, similar to the feeling that you would get when a thunderstorm is out. Except that there was almost no clouds out. All of my friends and I were freaked out, and the hair on all of our arms was standing straight up. Never got such a strong feeling of terror and dread before. Redditor 31, I was doing an Xbox 360 workout and my son was still a baby. I was doing a Just Dance game. The 360 scans your body, so I was standing there texting. All of a sudden I heard an evil laugh coming from the TV. I looked up and it said someone else joined, but I was alone. In the screen where it shows the silhouette of your body, it showed a ball of light. It started going haywire. The controls were moving by themselves. I turned it off and got my baby and went outside. I have many more experiences. Redditor 32, 1 footsteps on the stairs at night. 2 a giant painting at the end of our upstairs 20 feet landing, falling and landing crashed at my door, which was at the opposite end of said landing. 3 every day at 3 p.m. all of the heavy wrought iron and glass doorknobs and fixtures would somehow unscrew themselves and thud to the floor. Screws and everything. 4 knocking in the walls of my room. Would start behind my head and follow me around the room. 5 I kept my rosary hanging on the side mirror on my antique 3-mirror makeup vanity. One day it was slowly tapping up and down in the air against the mirror as if someone was lifting it and dangling it to tap. 6 all the cabinets and drawers in kitchen flying open. 7 our schnauzer wouldn't go upstairs. She'd growl looking up the stairs. 8 my younger sister's playroom was one of those rooms people just dreaded. No one went in there. I started watching people as they ascended up the twisting staircase, and everyone would speed up at the 7th step from the top and turn their head to avoid looking at the doorway that was immediate left as soon as you got to the top, and practically run to one of the other 5 bedrooms up there. 9 sound of a rocking chair rocking in the attic room in the back of my closet. 10 someone walking down the hallway, through my door, through my room and into my closet. 11 my 80s stereo turning on and the manual dial turning back and forth between channels. 12 same with TV. 13 coming home to knick-knacks stacked in a pyramid on the floor. Once they were in a perfect row on my shelving unit that went almost to the ceiling, at the top, but the piece de la resistance. 14 my bed levitating with me and my cat in, and then with my friends and I in it. That was the last time they spent the night, and when I say levitate, full on levitate and bang violently the right end footboard on the floor like someone very strong was binging it up and down. Bang. 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 Happened to my parents too. My bed was an old, extremely heavy, solid wrought iron bed that takes 2 people just to carry the headboard. And no, I'm not making any of this up. I don't know anyone here, so I have no skin in the game. In fact, some of my close family don't know about all of it. BC I thought they wouldn't believe me. I waited years to tell my mom when she brought her bed up again one time, reminiscing about that damn house. I told her I figured my dad would find some crazy explanation for everything. He did, of course. Redditor 33, so I've posted about this before, and I don't generally lean towards paranormal things, but when I was a teenager, I went on a hike in South Central PA by myself in the Appalachian Mountains. It was a day I was playing hooky, so there was nobody else there at the small trail, at least that I could see. You had to drive there was no foot traffic. I was young and had been talking, singing, horsing around the whole time, totally unconcerned. Yelling things off the top of the mountain, etc. On my way down from the mountaintop, I heard my dad's voice call my name and ask for help. I thought I was having a stroke, and stopped and almost started to follow, thinking WTF is my dad doing here? Did he follow me or something? And then I came to my senses and told myself, my dad is sitting in his office like an hour or more away. I heard it 2 more times in the space of a minute or 2, call me by name and tell me to come here and help me. It sounded so insistent, like it was urgent, and it was without a doubt my father's voice. I have never ran so ducking fast. I used to do this hike in bare feet, and I remember ducking my feet up hurrying down the mountain. I never went back and to this day don't know what the duck that was. I immediately drove to my dad's office and he was sitting at his desk working. I don't remember if I told him what I experienced at the time or not. Redditor 34, I was maybe around 7 years old. I was living with my grandma, mother, and sister at the time. Everyone was in the basement talking when I had to pee. Only bathroom was upstairs in the hallway. I decided to just run through the house to hurry up and pee, as I was scared of being alone. I can't explain the house layout for it to make sense, but you walk through the kitchen, turned, and walk down the hallway with the living room on your left. There was 2 entrances to the living room. One from the hallway, one from the kitchen. I passed the first entrance when I walked up to the second one. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a long man, laying on the floor. I stepped back, looking at the spot. I no longer saw anyone, but before I turned back I looked up. There was an extremely tall young man, dressed in black, bending down and just looking at all my facial features. I ended up running downstairs and telling my mom. OFC, she said it was my imagination. Years later I discovered it was my grandma's ex-husband that had passed away, looking at me because he passed a few weeks before I was born. I also discovered I can see a few other things and get messages from them which I got from my mother. My grandma recently had her first encounter, but none of my other siblings have ever experienced it. Redditor 35, when I was in HS, my friend and I was coming back from the movies, and when we got close to my house we both felt like something or someone was watching us. It was really weird. Then all of a sudden this big silver looking object was like right in front of the windshield. My friend hit the brakes and this object had a red light shining into the car and it was like scanning. Then it just flew off. We both said no one would believe us. It was crazy. Nobody believes us to this day. But we can't explain what it was. No one has come up with an explanation. Redditor 36, not really paranormal, but it is something I think about quite often. A couple of years ago back, it was me and a family member of mine, and a friend of theirs. We tried this TikTok trend where you play an audio and cover your eyes and things around you move. We didn't think anything would happen. We went to a quiet spot since we were doing this at a party at a house. The quietest spot we could find was a playroom, toys everywhere. We found a mirror desk and set up my phone pointing at his, and we all 3 were on our knees in front of the camera letting the audio play. After it was done we reviewed the footage and saw a plastic toy potato chip fly over us. We were decently weirded out by it but not freaked out. There was no possible explanation we were able to make on how this happened. No one moved. There was no baby, no animals, no nothing. No one was in there except the 3 of us. I always still wonder how it happened and why a plastic potato chip. Redditor 37, not my story, but my uncle and his family. When my cousins were born they bought them toys and one of them was like a Teddy Ruxpin, but it was a dog. Anyway, one night it kept going off for no reason. Eventually, my uncle got fed up and took its batteries out. Not even a few minutes later it starts going off again. Unsurprisingly, that thing was in the trash by the next day. Redditor 38, not sure if it's paranormal, but when my daughter was 2 years old she was looking up at the moon one night and I asked her what she was thinking. Expecting her to say something cute like, "Is the moon made of cheese, Daddy?" Instead she looks me in the eye and says, "We are all in the same cage." Scared the crap out of me. Not proud to say that I basically ran away. How the heck could a 2-year-old come up with that? Years later I heard this same sentence again. This time from Jack Nicholson. It's his first line in the movie Easy Rider. He says it to Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper in jail. And no, she hadn't seen Easy Rider at age 2. Redditor 40, not my story but my father's. He lived in Europe during the Gulf War and bought a wardrobe placing it parallel to his bed. In America we bolt furniture to the wall, but Dad said they didn't do that in his section of Europe, so he didn't bother. One night he hears his late grandfather's voice say in his ear, "Chad, wake up now. Chad, please wake up. You have to leave." My dad had lost a lot of his hearing in his first round and didn't hear the fire alarm go off because a building was on fire next to his. This somehow caused the wardrobe to fall right on his bed. If he hadn't gotten up he could have died.